In a compelling narrative, a fisherman named Syracuse makes an unexpected catch when he finds a beautiful woman entangled in his net. As Syracuse pulls in his net, he discovers that the woman is alive and quickly works to free her. After administering some basic resuscitation, she gasps for air, leading him to take her to his cabin with a promise to get her to a hospital. Despite his good intentions, the woman insists that she will only see him. When another boat approaches, she hides, further deepening the mystery surrounding her. Curious about her identity, Syracuse asks for her name, but she replies that she cannot remember. He speculates that she might have lost her memory after she falls into the water and introduces himself. He humorously mentions that most people call him Circus because they see him as a bit of a fool. When he presses the matter of taking her to the hospital, she becomes anxious and tries to jump off the boat, revealing her desperation and fear. Syracuse prevents her from leaping into the water and reassures her that he will take her to a safe place where she won't be seen by anyone. He brings her to his late mother's caravan, explaining that his mother was a recluse who valued her solitude, which means very few people are aware of this hidden location. However, as he leaves her there, he feels a pang of disappointment when she doesn't even take the time to say goodbye. Afterwards, Syracuse rushes to his ex-wife Maura's house to pick up their daughter, Annie. Maura scolds him for being late, but he dismisses her concerns and takes Annie to her dialysis appointment. While they wait there, Annie asks him to tell her a story to help pass the time. Syracuse decides to share a tale about his earlier encounter with a mysterious woman, presenting it as a fairy tale. Annie becomes intrigued and wonders aloud if the woman could be a mermaid or a selkie. Syracuse, not familiar with the term selkie, asks her to explain it. Annie explains that a selkie is a mythical creature, a seal woman who possesses the ability to sing. According to the legend, she can leave the sea, shed her sealskin, and live among humans until she is summoned back to the ocean. Once the dialysis session is over, a nurse surprises Annie with a brand new power chair that was donated by the CRC. Overjoyed by the gift, Annie can't wait to show it to her mother's boyfriend, Alex. The following day, Syracuse returns to the caravan and finds the mysterious woman singing by the stream. As he gets his boat ready for a day of fishing, she expresses a strong desire to join him. At first, he refuses her request, holding on to the belief that having a woman on a fishing boat brings bad luck. However, she challenges this superstition by reminding him that he hasn't had any good fortune recently, a truth he reluctantly acknowledges. Persuaded by her reasoning, he eventually agrees to let her accompany him. While they are fishing, Syracuse asks her about the song she was singing earlier, but she admits that she doesn't remember where she learned it. When he inquires if she has recalled her own name, she tells him to call her Ondine, a name inspired by a story about a girl who rose from the water. As the day continues, Syracuse and Ondine realize that all of Syracuse's lobster traps are coming up empty. However, while he is pulling in one trap and Ondine is singing, he is delighted to discover a lobster inside. Convinced that her song might be the reason for this unexpected stroke of luck, he asks her to sing again as he sets another trap. When he hauls up the next trap, he is thrilled to find 2 more lobsters waiting for him. This further strengthens his belief that Ondine is a lucky charm in his fishing adventures. Later on, Syracuse successfully sells a substantial amount of lobsters at the market. With the profits he makes, he decides to treat himself to some new clothes. However, feeling a bit playful, he discreetly swipes a few items while the sales clerk is distracted. Afterward, he goes to pick up Annie from school, and she excitedly challenges him to race home in her motorized wheelchair. As they make their way back, Syracuse continues to weave his story, sharing that the fisherman who encountered the mysterious woman catches more fish whenever she sings. After returning home, Syracuse leaves Annie at her place and then goes to visit Ondine, carrying with him the new clothes and some food. Upon his arrival, Ondine shows her appreciation by giving him a kiss on the cheek, but Syracuse doesn't visibly react to this affectionate gesture. Instead, he inquisitively asks her how long she plans to remain. In response, Ondine indicates that her stay is contingent on Syracuse, prompting him to warmly express that she is welcome to stay as long as she wishes, even indefinitely. Syracuse reveals that he has been recounting stories about Ondine to Annie, presenting them as if they were a fairy tale. This disclosure brings a smile to Ondine's face as Syracuse readies himself to depart. Following Syracuse's departure, Annie peeks out from the concealment of some bushes, her interest piqued by what mysteries her father might be concealing. Motivated by her curiosity, she makes her way to the library to borrow books on selkies, delving into the folklore that may shed light on her father's enigmatic behavior. Meanwhile, Syracuse makes a stop at the local church, seeking a meeting with the priest. In the absence of support groups in their town, Syracuse views these confessions to the priest as a vital component of his journey toward recovery. Within their dialogue, he recounts a disquieting dream he experienced involving a funeral, revealing his apprehensions about reconnecting with Mora, his former partner. Unlike Syracuse, Mora grapples with alcohol-related challenges, a situation that sparks concerns within him regarding Annie's welfare and upbringing, recognizing the potential impact of Mora's struggles on their daughter. The priest recommends that Syracuse should contemplate seeking assistance from a counselor for further support. Nevertheless, Syracuse refuses, asserting that his anxieties are too intimate to disclose to a professional. Reluctantly, he confesses to the priest that he took some women's clothing, attempting to rationalize his actions by expressing his discomfort at buying them openly, clarifying that it was for the woman he saved from the water. Upon further probing by the priest, Syracuse chooses to remain reserved regarding Ondine's location, opting not to divulge details. The following day, Annie pays a visit to the caravan and finds Ondine swimming in the water, a sight that solidifies her conviction in her father's tale. Upon laying eyes on Annie, Ondine recognizes her as Syracuse's daughter. In a sudden burst of curiosity, Annie questions Ondine about the possibility of possessing magical abilities, wondering if she could potentially heal her kidney failure. When Ondine remains silent in response, Annie persists, firing off a series of inquiries drawn from the books she has been reading. Feeling unsure of how to address these inquiries, Ondine extends an invitation to Annie to come inside the caravan, perhaps seeking a more conducive setting for their conversation. Annie hesitates at the caravan's entrance, apprehensive that Ondine may cast a spell on her if she steps inside. She vocalizes her thoughts, pondering whether being submerged in water might benefit her health, given her frequent bouts of illness. Ondine adeptly sidesteps Annie's inquiries, but the young girl remains resolute in her quest for knowledge about this mysterious woman, even proposing the idea of forming a friendship. This suggestion intrigues Ondine, prompting her to disclose that she feels a sense of transformation when immersed in water. Intrigued by Ondine's presence and the lore surrounding selkies, Annie inquires about Ondine's seal coat, only to be met with a puzzled expression. Annie elaborates on the legend, explaining that a selkie sheds her seal coat upon venturing onto land and cannot return to the sea until she retrieves it. Finding and burying the coat on land enables the selkie to remain on the shore for 7 years, finding joy and companionship with a man from the land. As their interaction draws to a close, Ondine, having enjoyed their exchange, bestows a kiss on Annie's cheek before bidding her farewell. In the meantime, Syracuse makes his way to the library with the intention of borrowing books on selkies, only to discover from the librarian that his daughter has already taken them out. On her journey back home, Annie crosses paths with a group of children who start mocking her about her wheelchair. One girl jests about taking a ride in it, and after some hesitation, Annie consents. However, the situation takes a turn when the girl tries to steer the wheelchair toward the water, causing it to break. This prompts Annie to push it back home herself. Upon their return, Alex, Annie's mother's boyfriend, sets about repairing the wheelchair. During this process, Annie queries him about his knowledge of selkies. Alex elucidates that they are a part of Scottish folklore, but Annie astutely notes that Ondine does not speak with a Scottish accent, raising a point of divergence from the traditional lore. Later on, Syracuse and Ondine set off together for a fishing trip. Syracuse tasks Ondine with steering the boat, but when another vessel passes by, Ondine promptly conceals herself, still cautious about being seen. To avoid drawing attention, she begins using her feet to navigate the boat, intriguing Syracuse with her unconventional approach. As Ondine performs a song, Syracuse is astounded to see his fishing net bring in an impressive array of fish. To his surprise, the catch includes salmon, which are usually not captured in this way. While Syracuse is busy collecting the fish, he notices the fisheries board patrol nearing his boat and quickly informs Ondine. When the patrol officers board the vessel, they notice the salmon in Syracuse's catch, which raises their suspicions. As they inspect the fishing equipment, they accidentally come across Ondine, who had been hiding. Both Syracuse and Ondine reassure the officers that all is well, and after a thorough examination, the patrollers eventually depart. Syracuse experiences a wave of relief, reassured by the tangible presence of Ondine, confirming that she is indeed real and not merely a product of his imagination. Nevertheless, Ondine voices her apprehension that the patrollers might gossip about her, but Syracuse offers reassurance, mentioning that he has weathered rumors in the past and isn't overly concerned about it. Understanding that news of Ondine is likely to circulate regardless, the duo opts to venture to the harbor jointly, attracting the attention of other fishermen. After selling their fish, Ondine accompanies Syracuse into town for a shopping errand to find clothes. During their excursion, they unexpectedly encounter Annie, who eagerly discloses that she has already crossed paths with Ondine. Thrilled to be reunited, Annie eagerly joins the group, showing great enthusiasm in helping Ondine pick out her new clothes. The three of them enjoy their time together, and Ondine, Syracuse's companion, quickly becomes the center of attention in the town. One day, Annie decides to visit Ondine on her own. When she learns that Annie cannot swim, Ondine generously offers to teach her. While they are in the water, Ondine discovers an object tangled in seaweed. Believing it to be her seal coat, Annie suggests that Ondine bury it, thinking that this would allow her to stay with them for 7 years. The two girls proceed to bury the wrapped item in an abandoned greenhouse close to the caravan. Subsequently, they join Syracuse on their way to the regatta. En route, Annie enthusiastically shares various myths about Selkies, elaborating on their ability to grant wishes and coexist with humans unless bound by a Selkie spouse. However, Ondine firmly refutes any associations with being a Selkie and denies having a husband. In the meantime, an enigmatic figure observes a seal swimming in the vicinity and tosses a fish into the water to feed it. Amid the ongoing festivities, Annie jestingly challenges Ondine to demonstrate that she is not a Selkie. In a moment of spontaneity, Annie maneuvers her wheelchair to the water's edge, resulting in an accidental plunge into the water. Immediately, Ondine swiftly moves to rescue Annie, with Syracuse quickly following to offer his aid. After Syracuse successfully helps Annie onto a boat, she reveals that her wheelchair's brakes had failed, causing the sudden accident. Once they drop Annie off at her mother Mora's house, Ondine confides in Syracuse, disclosing that Annie's fall had been intentional, designed as a test to demonstrate her extraordinary abilities. Inquisitively, Ondine inquires about the origin of the nickname Syracuse, leading him to recount a time when he performed as a clown during his drinking days. He reveals that he made the conscious choice to give up alcohol following a traumatic event where he found Annie in a dangerous situation while Mora was unconscious. This incident catalyzed for him to realize the necessity of sobriety and ensuring the safety of their daughter. Regrettably, this decision to stay sober ultimately contributed to the end of his marriage. While Ondine offers solace to Syracuse, a profound bond develops between them, leading to a heartfelt evening together. At the same time, Mora questions Annie about Ondine, revealing that someone is on the lookout for her. Troubled by this news, Annie later has a dream featuring a mysterious figure emerging from the water. The next day, Syracuse goes to confession, where he learns that the priest has already encountered Ondine. Sensing a close bond between Syracuse and Ondine, the priest encourages Syracuse to reluctantly acknowledge it. After leaving the church, Syracuse is confronted by the mysterious man, a moment he chooses to ignore. Later, he accompanies Annie to her dialysis appointment. Upon their arrival back at Mora's house, they discover it empty. While Syracuse and Annie comb the town in search of Mora, an unexpected car pulls up at Ondine's residence, catching her off guard. Swiftly, she retreats into the greenhouse as the mysterious man initiates a search of her home. Simultaneously, Syracuse locates Mora and Alex at the pub. Requesting their house keys to check on Annie, they decline, confident that Annie will be well looked after in their company. Reassured by Annie herself that she will be fine, Syracuse reluctantly leaves her in their care. On reaching the caravan, he discovers it has been disturbed. However, his concerns are eased when he spots Ondine near the stream. With a sense of urgency, she reveals her suspicion that the enigmatic man is her Selkie husband. Recalling Annie's tales of Selkies granting wishes, Syracuse proposes that Ondine could potentially use this knowledge to wish the man away. Nonetheless, Ondine refuses, expressing that her deepest desire is for Annie's health to be restored. The man consents to her wish, but puts forth his own. He desires Ondine to remain with them. The enigmatic man is en route back to town. Simultaneously, an inebriated Mora is driving, with Alex and Annie as passengers. Tragically, this chain of events culminates in a collision between their vehicle and the one driven by the mysterious man, leading to the immediate loss of Alex's life. Soon after, Syracuse and Ondine arrive here and of the accident, their hearts sinking as they witness the tragic aftermath. Hours later, Annie regains consciousness in the hospital, only to be swiftly whisked away for emergency surgery by the medical team. Syracuse and Ondine follow closely behind, navigating the hospital corridors. During their journey, they unexpectedly encounter the mysterious man, who calls out to Ondine upon seeing her. The sudden presence of this man triggers a flood of memories for Ondine, momentarily freezing her in the hallway. Simultaneously, a doctor pulls Syracuse aside to reveal that Alex has been a registered organ donor, and his kidneys are a suitable match for Annie. Armed with this crucial information, arrangements are promptly made for an urgent transplant procedure in a bid to potentially save Annie's life. At a later time, Ondine discovers the mysterious man in the chapel, where he is surprised to hear her conversing in the local dialect. Incensed by his presence, she demands that he leave, but he explains he cannot as the authorities wish to interrogate him regarding the accident. Drawing nearer to her, Ondine, feeling exasperated, storms out in frustration. Several days afterward, the funeral service for Alex takes place, during which a visibly injured Mora scatters his ashes. Syracuse observes with compassion, weighed down by a profound sense of responsibility for the tragedy. Despite his remorse, Mora consoles him, asserting that he bears no fault for the events that unfolded. She then proposes that Syracuse take Annie into his care at his residence, elucidating that she is incapable of tending to her daughter's needs while she herself recuperates. Nevertheless, Mora staunchly asserts that Ondine cannot reside with Annie. Following their discussion, they proceed to Alex's memorial gathering at the pub, where Mora subtly pressures Syracuse into consuming alcohol. During their interaction, Mora advises Syracuse to distance himself from Ondine, contending that while she initially brings him good fortune, she will ultimately usher in misfortune. Later that night, in an inebriated state, Syracuse navigates to his boat, where Ondine has sought refuge from the enigmatic man. Under the influence of alcohol, he resolves to escort Ondine back to her abode. As they sail further out to sea, Syracuse probes Ondine about the mysterious man, only to be informed by her that he is not her spouse. Disregarding her clarification, Syracuse maintains that Ondine would be more suited to the sea. They ultimately reach a lighthouse, where Syracuse decides to part ways with Ondine, convinced that their enchanting story must conclude to avert further calamities. The following day, the priest finds a recovering Syracuse perched in a tree, still feeling the effects of his hangover. Afterward, Syracuse takes Annie to his home. Annie, eager to know where Ondine is, asks Syracuse about her whereabouts. He explains that Ondine has gone on a task related to the sea. Despite his explanation, Annie insists that Ondine will return, pointing out that Ondine left something important behind. The next day, while Annie is absorbed in watching TV, Syracuse hears a song that resembles one Ondine often sings, though it is performed by a different artist. This revelation makes him reconsider the idea that Ondine might be more than just a myth. Motivated by his daughter's encouragement to uncover the truth, Syracuse decides to go back to the lighthouse. Upon his arrival, he catches sight of Ondine on the shore near the lighthouse, where she claims to have been soaking up the sun's rays among the seals. Intrigued by his unexpected return, she questions him, leading him to reveal that he had recognized her song on television. Motivated by a desire for understanding, Syracuse encourages Ondine to share her story, eventually prompting her to disclose the truth. She confesses that she is not the mystical being she appeared to be, but rather a woman from Romania who was involved in smuggling operations as a mule on a vessel. Their illicit activities were disrupted by coast guards, and a mysterious figure named Vladik was her handler. When faced with a perilous situation where he could not swim, he coerced her to abscond with the contraband in an escape bid. Nevertheless, with the shore out of reach, Ondine decided to let go of the bag of provisions and let herself sink into the water. It was at this critical juncture that Syracuse stumbled upon her. Guiding her back to the town, she reveals to him that her actual name is Joanna. Upon their arrival at Syracuse's residence, Their astonishment peaks as they come face to face with Vladik in the company of Annie. Enraged, Syracuse challenges Vladik and starts to physically assault him, only to be interrupted by Vladik's henchman, who pulls out a gun and directs it at Syracuse. The men proceed to question Joanna about the items she removed. Confusing their inquiry about her seal coat, Annie implores Joanna not to disclose where it is hidden. This conversation dawns upon Joanna that the package she stumbled upon earlier was, in fact, the bag of supplies. She consents to lead the men to the greenhouse, but upon their arrival, the bag is nowhere to be found. Furious, Vladik points fingers at Annie, suggesting she relocate the bag. Joanna pleads with Annie to disclose its location, offering to remain with them if she cooperates. In a moment of truth, Annie confesses that she concealed the bag within the lobster trap, leading the men to retrieve it. As they retrieve the bag, Annie quietly informs Joanna that her presumed husband does not resemble a Selkie. Recalling that her handler can't swim, Joanna seizes an opportunity by tugging on the rope they are standing on, causing them to stumble and plunge into the water, resulting in Vladik's demise. Soon after, the authorities arrive and arrest Vladik's accomplice. A few days later, Syracuse visits the priest to inform him that Joanna is facing deportation. To his surprise, he learns that getting married might be a way to prevent this from happening. Later, Annie talks to the priest and confesses that she had lied about throwing the seal coat into the lobster trap. In the end, Syracuse and Joanna exchange vows aboard the same boat where their paths first crossed, marking the beginning of a new shared journey and the promise of a joyous future together. Please like the video and subscribe to my channel, and also leave me a comment below with suggestions on what movie or series we should recap next.